It's the news of the world scandal that won't go away. A journalist and a private investigator jailed for hacking royal phones. But now celebrities are suing. The police have been forced to reopen a case they said was closed. And tonight, Panorama reveals law-breaking for the paper that goes way beyond listening in to phones.
I can tell you somebody's got a problem because this has been unlawfully accessed.
We track down the men in the shadows who broke the law for the paper.
How did he get it off my computer?
It wasn't that hard.
No, okay.
And we expose another News of the World executive deeply involved in these dark arts.
I'd like to talk to you about computer hacking carried out for the News of the World.
They must have been appalled. The rest of us were amazed. Almost 5 years ago, the News of the World was caught hacking into the voice messages of members of the royal household. Glenn Mulcair had done the hacking for Clive Goodman, the paper's royal correspondent. And the paper and its parent company News International insisted for years that only one rogue reporter had commissioned such law-breaking by the paper.
If it happens, it should not happen. It happened once at the News of the World. The reporter was fired, he went to prison, the editor resigned.
That was Andy Coulson, later hired by David Cameron to be his spokesman at Number 10. Andy Coulson has always maintained he knew nothing about phone hacking.
I can only speak for the newspaper that I edited for a period. And I'm absolutely sure that Clive's case was a very unfortunate rogue case.
But 5 other phones belonging to non-royals have been hacked into too. MPs said it was inconceivable that no one else knew it was going on. One rogue journalist, everybody on the street of shame thought that was the biggest porky any newspaper had ever told, which is saying something.
Tabloid newspapers thrive on celebrity. And the so-called dark arts, used to invade famous people's privacy to get the most intimate details of their lives, have been employed by the tabloids for years. And that's not a glamorous business at all. Fleet Street veteran Sean Hoare knows that all too well. He used to work at the News of the World, and the Sun before that. A tabloid journalist for over 20 years, chasing stories about celebrities. That lifestyle left him with a drink and drugs problem, and he lost his job. He's publicly admitted his part in phone hacking and claimed his editor, Andy Coulson, knew about it. As a result, he was recently interviewed by the police under caution.
I decided to exercise my right of no comment.
And he insisted his solicitor was present when he talked to us about wrongdoing by journalists on the paper.
It was endemic. You know, it happened.
When you say it was endemic, phone hacking and the use of illegal practices to secure stories, that was endemic. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Yeah. People were scared, right? So if you've got to get a story, you've got to get it. And you have to get that by whatever means.
Were you subject to that pressure?
Yeah. Yeah, of course I was. I mean, that is the culture of News International.
Let's be grown up about it. Journalists have often found themselves in conflict with the law, and with good reason. We may lie and do all sorts of things that seem in the ordinary way to be underhand, and we may have a defence, but only if the publication of the story is in the public interest, which means exposing wrongdoing, not just exposing people's private lives. And that defence won't wash if we resort to plain old-fashioned crime.
Journalists use subterfuge and deceit to obtain information in many circumstances which are quite legitimate. They may use secret cameras, they may use secret tape recorders. Those methods do not infringe the criminal law.
And there's a clear line where subterfuge and deceit become criminal law breaking.
Normally, it's about the method which is used. If you access without authority people's private computers, if you hack their phones, you will have no public interest defence.
At the News of the World, the key people who decided what stories to chase were the senior executives on the news desk. And if there was no way that information could be obtained properly by journalists, the allegation is they knew people outside the paper who were prepared to break the law to get it for them.
So the news desk had people who had customary access to bank accounts,
I would imagine so, because, you know, you can see a story.
phone accounts,
Yeah,
mortgage accounts, health records.
yeah.
So the news desk could commission people to do their dirty work for them and get by legal means these pieces of information.
I think that's a reasonably fair way of saying it.
And it wasn't just the News of the World. Amongst the people the tabloid journalists relied on heavily for this sort of work in the late 90s was a private detective agency called Southern Investigations. The company was the subject of secret surveillance by Scotland Yard. They believed that it was involved in corruption, using serving and retired police officers to access sensitive intelligence for the purpose of progressing crime and selling information to the press. The man who ran Southern Investigations was Jonathan Rees. We've obtained transcripts of the police recordings at his agency. They prove how the tabloids really got lots of their stories. We've based reconstructions on these transcripts.
Gary Jones, Accounts Department, is leaning on him.
On July the 6th, 1999, Rees was on the phone to the Daily Mirror, one of his biggest customers.
Gary Jones, please.
Gary Jones is now deputy editor of The People. In 1999, he was a reporter on the Daily Mirror. Rees had a row with him about an invoice and underlined that the job had been illegal.
Gary, this is tiresome. Tiresome. We're not going to put numbers in there because what we're doing is illegal, isn't it? You know, I don't want people coming in and nicking us for criminal offences.
But so long as the police recordings remained secret, journalists could deny responsibility for any wrongdoing by the agency.
The agency can do its work, a lot of it illegal, and the journalist doesn't know how the information is being obtained, or will say that he doesn't know, because if they did admit to the knowledge of what was going on, then they, the journalists, would be themselves committing a crime.
The Mirror Group employed Southern Investigations to target members of the royal family. A reporter was recorded discussing buying details of a royal bank account, the business account of Sophie Rhys-Jones, the Countess of Wessex. The reporter was Doug Kempster from the Sunday Mirror.
Do you remember a couple of months ago you gave me some details on Edward's business and Sophie's business?
Yeah.
And you did a check on Sophie's bank account?
Yeah.
Is it possible to do that again?
Did I do it for you?
No, it was Gary, I think. She had about £1,000 in there last time.
And other royals were targeted as well. Access was obtained to the business bank account of Prince Michael of Kent. Gary Jones wrote that story for the Daily Mirror.
It's completely outrageous that Prince Michael's bank details should be made public. He has a right to privacy over his private financial affairs as anybody else. And it adds absolutely nothing to the public interest, and there's absolutely no justification for it whatsoever. And the same can be said for the Countess of Wessex, if her private bank details are accessed. Now, this is absolutely outrageous and completely unacceptable.
Outrageous? Certainly intrusive. But whether it was illegal depended on the method finally employed. And just as the papers hired private detectives, they in their turn subcontracted to specialists as well. So few people in the village of White Parish in Wiltshire would have known that the private investigator who accessed those bank accounts lives here. His name's John Gunning. We wanted to talk to him.
Mr. John Gunning?
Yeah?
I wonder if I could have a word with you.
No, I don't want to speak to you.
I'd like to speak to you about the accessing of people's bank accounts, prominent people's bank accounts. I'm from BBC Television Panorama.
Asked by email about his activities, including getting prominent people's bank account details, John Gunning said, "It's about knowing someone who knows someone." In a statement, Mirror Group newspaper says its journalist last used Southern investigations in 1999, and it has not seen evidence that this involved them breaking the law. Doug Kempster told us it had been a slip of the tongue to ask for bank account details. He meant to ask for publicly available company accounts. Jonathan Rees and Southern investigations prospered. One client was paying his agency tens of thousands of pounds a year. That was the news of the world.
One particular journalist was heavily involved with the agency, and as I understand it, he arranged it so that everyone else on the News of the World who wanted confidential information, who wanted the agency to do things, everything was channeled through him.
The News of the World executive who dealt with Southern was this man, Alex Maranchek. Maranchek paid the agency for a number of exclusive stories, plainly based on confidential police material. Several were about the murder of Jill Dando. Another was based on confidential documents from Special Branch. The recordings showed some journalists wouldn't pay police officers for information. But Jonathan Rees thought Maranchek could be relied upon.
We know a certain old Bill who gave a front page story and didn't get all. So Alex is going to get him a couple of grand.
Maranchek was still a News of the World executive when his boss, editor Andy Coulson, and News International executive Rebecca Wade were questioned about this practice by MPs. There was a remarkable admission.
We have paid the police for information in the past, and it's been...
And will you do it in the future?
We
operate within the code and within the law, and if there's a clear public interest, then the same holds for private detectives, for subterfuge, for video bags, whatever you want to talk about.
It's illegal for police officers to receive payments.
No, we don't. As I said, within the law.
Journalists paying police officers for information is corrupt and illegal, and I don't believe that it can be justified under any circumstances. It can completely destroy cases, because if this information gets out in the public domain, it can get into the hands of criminals and completely undermine cases. It is an illegal practice that should not be tolerated.
The News of the World told us that it has a long history of investigative reporting and proudly stands by its record. It says Panorama has provided no evidence of wrongdoing in relation to the private detectives featured in the programme. The Crown Prosecution Service had found no evidence that the reporters involved were acquiring material by corrupt means. In 2000, the police surveillance helped to convict Jonathan Rees of a criminal conspiracy to plant cocaine on an innocent person. He was sentenced to 7 years imprisonment. But as we'll see later, once he'd served his time, the same man would be hired by the News of the World again. Should the police have taken action then, years before the current phone hacking scandal broke, to put a stop to law-breaking by journalists? Not one was prosecuted over the Southern Investigations affair. The attack on people's privacy and the distress that it caused to victims continued. A new information commissioner was established to police data protection. They discovered that ordinary people's privacy was being assaulted on an industrial scale from a quiet suburban street. In 2003, they raided the premises of a private detective called Stephen Whittemore.
When his home here in Hampshire was raided, there was a remarkable haul, and one very embarrassing for Fleet Street. It revealed that the business of the dark arts was booming.